Good evening and welcome to the Monday, November 28th Maplewood City Council Manager Workshop. City Manager Coleman, would you do the roll call for us, please?
Yes, Mayor. Let's start with Councilmember Villavicencio.
Here.
Councilmember Knutson.
Here.
Councilmember Juniman.
Here.
Mayor Abrams.
Here.
And note for the record that Councilmember Cave is not with us this evening.
Thank you. Council members, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Juniman, seconded by Knutson. The motion to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We have no unfinished business tonight. We have 2 items of new business. The first one, City Manager Coleman, do you want to just tee this up for us before we
Sure.
make a motion?
Yes. Mayor Abrams, members of the City Council, this evening we are going to have a closed meeting to provide an update on the 2022 contract negotiations with the LELS Sergeants Group and seek council direction on that. Before the meeting is closed, the council must state for the record the specific grounds permitting the meeting to be closed and describe the subject to be discussed. Therefore, it's recommended that the city council include the following language in your motion, and it's highlighted on your packet page 1.
Thank you. Council members, is there a motion to close the meeting?
Pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D, excuse me, .03, Subdivision B, I hereby move to close the regular meeting to go into closed session to provide an update on the 2022 contract negotiations with the LELS sergeants and seek council direction.
Second.
Moved by Juniman, seconded by Villavicencio. The motion to close the meeting pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03, Subdivision B, for purposes of discussing the 2022 contract negotiations with the LELS sergeants. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is passed, and we are now going into closed session. We'll be back. We are back in order, back from a closed session. We had a discussion with staff and we gave them direction. And now we're moving on. We have one more agenda item tonight, the Purple Line engagement process. And City Manager Coleman, did you want to start this
Sure.
out, or do you want me to?
It's up to you. You want me to do the intro?
Sure, you can do
Okay.
the intro. Then I can
All
talk
right.
just a little bit less.
Get your voice back. Good evening, everybody, Mayor and Council. As we have been talking about at our previous meetings, the Metropolitan Council has been leading the design of the Purple Line Bus Rapid Transit Project in partnership with Ramsey County, MnDOT, and additional cities such as St. Paul, Maplewood, Venice Heights, Gem Lake, White Bear Lake, White Bear Township. The City of Maplewood has discussed this, and it would like to fashion a public engagement process that gets to the core of the city's future transit needs. And we talked about that at our last meeting, I think. On the second page of your staff report, there's sort of a framework that the mayor has established, which kind of launches the conversation this evening about who should the engagement process include, what does that look like, and one of the things that I hadn't thought about, frankly, was who's going to facilitate these meetings. Who should that be? So there's a few things that we'd like to hear from everybody tonight, but I'll let the mayor take it from here.
Thank you very much. I have learned that one thing that Maplewood does really, really well is public engagement. And we have, through my time on the council, I have gone through the North End study, our Parks Master Plan, the ponds, Rice Larpenter. We have just had so many big community discussions about big issues. And I just really believe that we have the ability to have a discussion about transit and about our future transit needs and what that might look like. And in trying to kind of structure this, some of the things based on the public engagement that I've been involved with while I've been on the council, it makes sense to identify who should be included. And this certainly is I think it should be an expansive list of people who would like to commit to having these discussions, because it is going to take a little bit of time. But just off the top of my head, this isn't anything magical. This is just some of the obvious people or groups that I thought really needed to be part of this. Residents, obviously. Century College, St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce, because they represent a number of businesses. Some businesses in town, I know it's been suggested, perhaps Menards, perhaps Costco, the mall. It certainly is not, limited in scope. St. John's Hospital is another large entity. Senior citizens, I know we have a group, the No Rush Line group. I think certainly I have been in communication with them. They certainly have done quite a bit of legwork, and they've collected data on it. But council members, let's start by discussing, is there anyone else? And it's not, if we don't come up with these ideas tonight, maybe if you want to share them with Melinda, and we can start pulling this together, because what I kind of envision is that we have this discussion, and then we turn it over to staff in terms of actually putting this together and what this looks like, because we would need to be inviting people. We need to identify what data we want to take a look at, and then how are we going to engage? What does that process look like? We've done a variety of things, from pop-ups to community meetings to Zoom meetings. I think that we have a wide array of ways that we can reach out to people. So this is kind of just to get your thought processes going, but is there anyone else that jumps out to you as to who should be part of this? Councilmember Villavicencio, you've got your light on.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yes, so I've thought about this a little bit, and I hope we can continue to have this conversation. I think that young people should be included, especially as we talk about Century College and obviously senior citizens. You mentioned that already. Young families, though, too, because I think when we've had our hearings, I always think, on a Monday night, most young families probably don't have time to spend 3 hours at a meeting to tell people if they like or need transit in their life. So I think focusing in on, like I said, young people, young families, seniors, also the Asian community. Obviously, the Hmong community has a huge influence in our city, but the Asian community as a whole. I've spoken to people at the Filipino Center of Minnesota, which is obviously very close to where the Bruce Vento Trail is. So, and you know, they're interested in having conversations too. I think, you know, I know you mentioned this too, but I think key businesses are really could be a good point. Like for instance, the Unison is a trusted business in Maplewood that maybe they would host an event, and the Tubman Center has always been really impactful in Maplewood. Obviously, the YMCA, yeah, I think. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention too is the. I think we should do a fully Zoom one, because I think in person is always good, but I think making sure we do a Zoom one for folks that maybe cannot go, or if they're not feeling well or whatever, still want to have their voice heard.
So maybe a variety of options, depending on how people want to engage or how they feel comfortable engaging. Okay? Council members, any other groups that, organizations, groups, you know, and it's Councilmember Villavicencio, let me drill down a little bit on that. When you say young families, how do you how do you define that? How do you approach, is it through the school district? Is it through, what are you envisioning?
Well, so for instance, obviously most of you all know that I have a young daughter, and so at Weaver, they have a parent-teacher group. And so if we contact all or the majority of the parent-teacher groups in Maplewood and invite them, at least it spreads the word out.
Okay, anyone
start.
else? Any other groups that you can think of? And obviously, if something comes up later on, you
Yeah.
can certainly send an email to Melinda Coleman.
I don't know, possibly appropriate, but there was 5 members of that bigger group that are that are appointed because of their focus on Maplewood, maybe 1 or 2 or some
Okay.
of them. Because, you know, they've been working with the Met Council, you know. I forgot the name of the group, but they represented every city that was in the pathway of it. And I was a list of about 40 that have volunteered to be on it, and I was asked to select 5 representing Maplewood.
What that group was called, Steve, it was an arm of it was an extension of one of the
Yeah.
PACs or something,
Yeah.
right, or PAC.
Yeah, I think it was like a community business group, but I
They're
Community Business Association.
well, they were, you know, and Liz from Metro Transit kind of ran the
Okay.
thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Liz, yeah.
Don't forget the young
There's a
man who
number of folks that were on the
volunteered,
Gold Line
that
CPAC
Thorn
Yeah.
guy
that
that
would
was.
probably
But the-
also be interested.
came up
But then,
and
yeah,
talked
and
to
I
me.
I went through, and remember, I was asked to recommend
Yes.
the 5 that
Okay.
represented Maplewood. So, I mean, it's just a
You
possibility.
know, that's an idea too, because they already have some history.
They do,
So
and-
that's a really good idea.
And what their comment was, that when I did poll a couple of them, they just said, you know, they
Email,
were
I think.
running towards implementation and would kind of like to come back and talk a little bit more about the rationale and everything else.
Okay. I think we've got a pretty good list. Councilmember Juniman, do you have anything else you'd like to
That
add?
young man that came in and talked to after the last meeting, because he follows both the youth and the mass transit thing, so I think we should include him for sure.
Okay.
Thorne was his first name. Thorne was his first
Maybe you
name.
can think, okay,
He was going to email you.
okay.
He's probably on our attendance list. that's
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think that's a pretty good start, at least to identify a group, and if anyone thinks of anything else, we certainly want to be inclusive and make sure that we hear from a wide spectrum of opinions and thoughts and needs, because we're really talking about something very important that the East Metro needs. So what data is needed for review? And once again, this was just brainstorming, information from the No Rush Line group. I think we sent out that information. They have a lot of data that they have collected. I think that's important to take a look at. The post-pandemic ridership numbers from Metro Transit. We have been hearing about the post-pandemic ridership number or data since last June when the Met Council staff were here, and we still have not seen anything. So I think we really need to seek that out from Met Transit and see, do we have that data? If not, why not? And when are we going to get it? Because I think that's pretty important. I think that goes along with what you just talked about implementation. When we don't really even have the numbers yet, how could you get to that point? It seems that we're missing something there in the process.
I do recall hearing from Victoria that it is a federal requirement that all of these projects that we're going to get funded are required to have a post-COVID study to verify numbers, and I think that's required.
Okay, well, we need to know what that is.
That's as much as I know, so.
Okay, we need to know what that is and have that shared with us and with this group as well. Councilmember Juniman.
Well, I don't know if they, since we don't know if they have any new numbers to give us, it'd be nice to know when they gathered them. And I think we should request them oftener rather than less often. In other words, are they going to be increasing? And the only way you're going to know that is if you do it more than once, and you do it as the calendar year unfolds. So we should have those numbers more than one time. Whether they only intended to gather them one time is irrelevant. We want more than that, I think.
So follow up and.
Yes,
Okay.
because if they're going to increase, it's to their advantage anyway. But we have to know that for real. We can't just imagine things.
Okay, thank you. One of our residents sent me an article concerning federal data, and I asked Lois if she would make copies for the rest of the council. I take it you've had a chance to take a look at it. Federal data shows the Twin Cities light rail is the most dangerous in America. Did you folks take a look at that?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, then,
It was on our desk last meeting. I did take that.
okay.
I missed it.
Well, we can make sure that council members get a copy of that.
Is it a St. Paul article?
I've got a copy of it right here. You can just make copies when we're done, I think, and make sure that council members get it. But it, excuse me, it was shared with me by one of our residents, and it is a study that they have done. Now, this only covers light rail, which light rail connects to bus rapid transit. It connects to all transit, but what they have here, and certainly I don't know the efficacy of this study. I don't know anything about it, but what I did do was I shared this with our Met Council representative, Sue Vento, and asked her to please share this with staff and find out, is this accurate data? And if it's not, then what's wrong with it and what are the real numbers? Because on the light rail, we're compared with cities like Houston and Dallas and LA and Portland and Buffalo, St. Louis, and
I think so.
we have more security events per billion passenger miles than everybody else. And it's actually it's about double the next closest city to us, which is a big concern for me, that we want to make sure that we have a safe transit system for everyone. And I haven't heard back from Met Council staff on their response to this. Is it accurate? Isn't it accurate? I think we all know that sometimes data can be
Skewed.
misused. It can be misinterpreted. I want to make sure that we've got the accurate data. But after reading it and looking at it, because there is such a discrepancy, it just made me wonder, what are other cities doing that we're not doing? Are we not, why aren't we talking with the Houstons and the Newarks and the Boston to find out why are their incidents of, security events so much less than what we have here in the metropolitan area, in Minneapolis-St. Paul. So I think we need to really talk about that. It's something that I brought up last June, one of my concerns about transit security, that if people don't feel safe on transit, they're not going to want to use transit. And transit is just so important. It seems that, we need to have this discussion about safety and security. And if these aren't the right numbers, then what are the right numbers? And what are we doing to address what appears to be, a significant number of security events that other light rails in large metropolitan areas just don't seem to be? Are they not recording them? Are we recording more? What is the basis for this? It's a big concern for me. Councilmember Juniman.
Yeah, one of my neighbors actually works in the safety department at Met Transit, so I talked to him about this, and he said, well, it's a variety of things. Number one, when you're talking about bus rapid transit versus light rail, you're talking about two distinct groups of people using it in a different fashion. Because light rail, you can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and people use it all day long to sit in one place. These buses are going to be going often enough. It's not conducive to doing the same kind of behaviors, according to him anyway. But they also have been reorganizing and trying to hire, hand over fist, many more security officers, because they do believe they did not have enough. So that's two things that I've heard, and the one about the hiring, and they've been trying, and since the pandemic, of course, it wasn't as
Sure.
successful, but it's opening up. But the pressure on them didn't need to come from the public, it was coming from the drivers.
Well, I think it's time, since we're going to have this
Right.
discussion about the future of
Right.
transit,
And the other
we
thing
need
is,
to include a discussion
I
about
don't know if
safety.
those numbers include the regular bus routes.
Right, I don't know. I at least the way I read this, it's light rail. But
Okay.
I'm waiting to hear a response from Met Council staff
Okay.
as to tell us about these numbers. What is this?
Yeah,
You know,
because
we want to make sure that it's
that's
safe for
two different
everyone.
numbers too, because the drivers of the bus routes we had now, the routes are so bizarre, might we say. That's why you can't really compare them to what bus rapid transit would be, because the routes we have now are inefficient, and so not a lot of people ride, and so when not a lot of people ride, the route gets bigger because they don't. It's just a vicious circle, but the drivers are also turning up the heat and saying, well, we're not going to drive if we're not safe. So I think we're in luck, if you will, that they are very aware of their need for increased safety. How they're going to address it remains to be seen, other than they are doing more. I know they're doing more hiring
And we
right
need
now.
to ask them that.
Yep.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
Well, so in my experience, obviously, I don't drive. And so when I go to other cities, I use public transit quite often. And what I've noticed in other large cities is that they have, I don't know like the official titles, but they're like transit guides. So they're not officers that have weapons, but they have power to like give tickets if you're doing something. They have the ability to like help you with directions and kind of make sure things that are things are going the way they're supposed to be going. And cities like New York and Vegas and places that have quite a bit of crime have those type of programs.
And I'd like to know, why don't we do something like that here to make sure that the transit is safe for everybody?
I agree. I mean, I know lots of advocates, including myself, that have called for this to the Met Council. And maybe there's some way that we could look at in Maplewood of doing something similar, like in the North End, for instance, or something like that. I don't know.
Well, they have the jurisdiction over the buses, we don't.
Right.
So it's something that, I think we have to look to the Met Council for answers to this, but we certainly can, I think, ask the questions, because these are just too critical when we talk about the future. Another thing that I came up with in terms of what data we need, what kinds of transit do we have right now? Because the people that I'm talking to say that it is pretty much impossible to get from Maplewood to any place around the metro area in any kind of efficient time, because we just don't have enough transit and it's sporadic, and it's very frustrating to people. And, that coupled with the post-pandemic ridership numbers, we need to be able to look at all of that, and how does that work together? So I think we need to look at the transit maps and what do they provide to the East Metro, because when I went on the Met Council website and looked at the transit maps, boy, the South and the West Metro, they have so many options to get around, whereas the East Metro, we just don't. And that really is something that I would like to make sure that we address. Councilmember Juniman.
The other end, that one.
It's my cold. Or
I
my
know, it's fine.
congestion.
It's fine. I'm here, it's all that matters. Just point. I do think part of it is what you said, and we've put up with crappy service for so long that it has never gotten better. And way back when they first brought this up to us, which I think was 2016, and they were here, and I asked at that time, and I've asked once since, how are you going to bridge the gap for the people that don't live right on the line? So you're going to have a plan for bus routes that hook to the,
Feeder lines.
yes, feeder lines, and we can, they're welcome to look at our neighbors and their densities and who lives there so that they can figure out how they're going to make themselves more efficient. Because if you live more than a mile away from a stop, in days like tomorrow sounds like it's going to be, unless you've got a way to get to the stop, the system is going to do you no good. And if we're talking about all the different age groups that we were talking about, that's a really important piece, is the linkage to those stops. Otherwise, the whole system will fail.
Yeah. One other thing I thought about too, Councilmember Villavicencio, it's something that you brought up, that from your experience, now that, I think, aren't we getting some kind of a snow event tonight?
Yep.
And tomorrow?
Yep.
And it was very disturbing to hear from you that the bus station, or stops, are not shoveled out.
Oh, no, that's been an issue since the beginning of time, always. Obviously, I live on C, and that stop, so the big issue is that the stations are not all ran by the Met Council. Some of them are owned by private companies, private businesses. So even if the Met Council makes a policy that they'll clean all of their stations, that doesn't mean that all the stations or stops will be cleared off, because some of the stops are on private property.
It still seems to me that it's something that needs to be addressed.
Oh, yeah, and it can be, right? I'm just saying
right.
that's.
I didn't realize, I guess I didn't realize that.
Yes.
But that's something I think that should be part of our discussion as well, because if people can't get access to transit in what really is about at least 6 months out of our year,
Yeah.
That is really
Dangerous. I've been literally in the middle of the road waiting for buses. And people yell at me, "Get out of the road." I'm like, "I'm waiting for the bus."
Yeah, that's, I think, should be part of our discussion, and I don't know where we fit that in. Under maybe data, let's find out who owns these bus stops and the enclosed, whatever, the semi-enclosed, who is responsible for them, and what is the plan to get those cleared out, and I think.
And most of them in Maplewood don't even have benches.
Right.
Right.
Only some of them have benches.
Well, and I have to say that here in Maplewood, we tend to be very spoiled by our Public Works Department. I'm looking at Mr. Love over here, that, they are so dedicated at getting our streets, our sidewalks, they're so dedicated at getting all of those things opened. Theirs isn't the responsibility to do the bus stops. That's the Met Council.
Yep.
And so we don't want to take on anything, but we want to find out who is responsible for that, and what do we need to do to get that fixed?
Well, and ultimately, they're responsible. It's their system. It's like, I really don't care who they farm the stop out to. They need to make sure it's cleaned out.
That's right. And that should be part of our discussion, maybe under data, so that we can find out who's responsible for it. Because what we're really looking at is the East Metro. And
Yep.
what we, I think, can do as a community will have an impact on the whole East Metro and make this a much better system for everybody. Councilmember Knutson, you had something you wanted to
Yeah,
add?
I'm just thinking kind of overall, part of this, as well as transit maps is one thing, but then, there's a purpose for each type of route. They're going to express route, during the feedback we get from people talking about the restaurant, wow, the express route, well, that's different. That's not the intention of the express route. So what's the intention of the route? What purpose does it have to move? You got neighborhood to neighborhood, you got connectors. There's a transfer station at Rosedale. So you see a lot of buses, with a marker saying Rosedale.
Yeah.
What happens then?
But Maplewood's not connected to Rosedale.
I'm just saying,
I know,
from a
which is another
concept point of view,
reason,
yeah.
which makes no sense at all.
Doesn't.
And I have a piece of it sitting here, and you have a piece of it, but somehow, the responsibility for this whole thing is to really look at transit and say, are we really serving the people that need and want to use transit? There's that whole part of want to use transit that we've got to look for, because that's what's going to fill ridership.
And it's not
So how do you
only,
make this system attractive for people to want to use it, not
Yes.
have to? I mean, we take care of the have to, absolutely. But then how do we address a system that you want?
and it's not only people who are disabled, Nikki has a particular problem that makes this venture more important, but I can't name you 5 seniors that are going to walk to a corner where they're going to stand in a snowdrift to take a
Right.
bus. It's just not going to happen. It's not safe enough.
Right. If the stations aren't cleared out, and if people aren't going to feel that they're safe on transit, you aren't going to get people wanting to use transit. And I've heard the argument that the more people that use transit, the safer it gets.
Yeah.
But until you change the perception.
Right.
And maybe that's a question too for the Met Council, is this article about, the metropolitan, or the Minneapolis-St. Paul being the most dangerous light rail system in America. Unless you start changing that perception, no one's going to want to, we're not going to get ridership. It's not going to change. So this is much more of a holistic discussion.
I was just thinking, I hope you don't mind, we're bouncing around a little bit.
Oh,
as this
no.
stuff sinks in. I'm just wondering if the places that are compared to, if the similar type of situation. Like if you go to Washington DC and ride the metro, I mean, you open the door and, whoa, I got to get
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Or, and the worst thing that happened is you maybe get too close to someone, but you don't
Right.
feel. The only time you feel unsafe is you're just so crowded.
And that's why we need to
know.
hear from the Met Council about this, because they would know about these systems,
Right.
whereas we may have anecdotal thoughts about it, but nothing that really, it's not factually based. But as long as there is a perception that transit is not safe, it's going to be problematic. It's going to be problematic. Okay, so how will we engage the stakeholders? A national citizen survey, let's talk for a minute about that. Melinda, do you want to remind us all about this national citizen survey that we do?
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, we are planning to do that after the new year. We just think now is a time when we might not get the same response we will if we wait till after the holidays. It does have some transit types of questions baked into the survey, so we will have comparative data from the past. But then we're also going to purchase additional questions to dive a little bit deeper into the transit, try to get more transit information from our residents.
Good.
So, and we can run those questions by you before we ship it out.
I think that
So
would
you
be
have some
good.
input on that.
And so you and staff will put together the questions? and
Well,
then-
most of them are preset already, but then you can buy 3 questions or 5 questions or whatever. And so Joe and I haven't met on that yet, but Joe and I and Lois will be meeting on what those
Okay.
questions look like with input from Steve and Mike Martin as well.
Because I think the more a variety of ways that we have people to give their input, to share their thoughts, the better that's going to
Yeah, I
be.
think the goal will be to try to obtain information about who needs it, sort of the question that Councilmember Knudsen posed. Who really needs this transit? Who are we trying to do this for? And so that's one of the things that we're going to try to get at.
You have a St. John's that has a need and a want.
Right.
Because they want, I'm sure staffing's a problem, and If you could find an efficient way to get people there at odd shifts, I mean, that's gonna be
Especially
a
when,
lot to enter.
if they could get from Minneapolis or St. Paul to St. John's. I mean, wouldn't that be something?
Right.
Yeah.
And right now, I don't know how in the world you would do that.
It
Not
ain't
during
easy.
odd shifts.
No, well, you'd have to go on 94 or University. And connected, that's the
Yeah.
only possible way, which would be.
Okay, so meetings, I think one of the things that we have to, oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Juniman.
Sorry, is there some way we could put something in the Maplewood Living once we get our act together, get things nailed down?
Yeah, we generally do try to get people's attention through the
Yeah,
Maplewood Living
'cause a
about
lot-
the upcoming survey.
Yes.
Yeah.
But not only that, could we do have our own, like, a point person or something for emails? For about this. So it'd be some way to funnel it right into here
To collect the information.
from
And
our
we-
own residents.
We do, the National Citizen Survey is also on our webpage, so we do get people who might not have gotten the card in the mail that, so
Sure.
we open it up to anybody who's on our webpage.
But I
But
just
we
thought-
could promote that better,
Yeah, and if we had our own little 3-question thing of,
or targeted
yes.
just to that. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
And to add to that, could we have like a page on our website that people could go to, like if they have comments or questions?
Yeah. We usually do that with the survey, but we could be more targeted about it as well.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea. And then in terms of meetings, Zoom or in person, I think a variety would be a good idea, recognizing that, we don't know what necessarily this winter season is going to be like. And
And we had really positive feedback even pre-pandemic for those 2 task forces, getting a variety of ages and interests because they could do it from home. So I think we can still appeal to that variety of age bracket by the fact that they don't have to get out of their house and come.
right. And if we have a snow event,
Yes.
we can still have our engagement. But I see this, quite frankly, pulling this together and starting this in the new year
Yes.
and having a series of meetings. I think it needs to be targeted. I don't know, council members, is this something, are we thinking that this is going to be, I don't know, 4 meetings, 6 meetings? I don't know. Maybe that's something to kind of think about for a little bit. And maybe going to that next question, who will facilitate the discussion? We need to have someone who that's what their skill set is, to run a meeting like that. And I think that's something that,
Thick skin, yeah.
what?
With
Yeah.
thick skin. yeah.
Well,
Yeah, that too, but.
yes, but I think it's something, maybe staff can look at that and, City Manager Coleman?
Yeah, I would just suggest that you might share with me what qualities you're looking for. What are the most important things you want this facilitator to be able to do? Is it just strictly facilitating meetings, or is it someone who has a background in transportation or transit planning? Is it,
Yeah.
what kind of person is it? If it's just strictly a facilitator, that leaves it probably more open.
And I think, can we partner it with somebody else too? Like it could be a staff person and a council member or a staff.
Well, I think we should have somebody personally
I
on the
think it has to
outside.
be someone from
the
the
outside.
outside.
Yep.
That,
Yep.
we used Perkins and Will for Rice Larpenter, we used Perkins and Will for
North End, North End,
ponds.
North
The
End.
guy we did with the strategic planning session was good.
Right, so,
It has to be somebody who's disassociated from it.
Craig Rapp.
I think,
Who's a former
in order
city.
to hear everybody and everybody feel like they're heard equally, I think it has to be somebody disassociated from the organization, so to
right,
speak.
I do too, because this really is to hear from our community. And,
I have a really good idea.
Yeah.
yeah,
Have the new guy that's replacing me go out in mid-January and do door knocking.
Oh, please.
I thought you were going to volunteer to be the facilitator.
That's what I was just going to say. I nominate Bill.
Another
Yeah,
comment,
thoughts?
question. Yeah, so I think we can find, with staff, we can put out some feelers about who might be good to do that. I think before we do that, at least to some degree, we got to know the scope.
Yep.
Is it 6 meetings? Is it 8 meetings? Is it 2-hour time slots?
So are
it
we
Zoom
in
and
charge of
live?
this, or is all of what we're saying going to Met Council, and then they're going to muck it up and
No,
send it
we're
back to
going
us?
to do this. This is our process.
Okay, so
This is our process.
at some point, how do we make the point to them that we're also then going to set the timeline? Because I can envision them saying, okay, well, we said this is going to be done by blah, and by grab it's going to be done by blah, whether the engagement process is done or not. And it's like, okay, well, that flunked one time, so maybe we should maybe have a timeline that makes sense.
You know, I think I would like to, maybe when you identify a facilitator, there might be some, is it 6 meetings? Is it 2-hour sessions? I mean, to me, that kind of makes sense, but I don't know why I think that. I'm just kind of guessing, I guess. And I don't want, I think we could find someone who would actually have a recommendation. We don't want it to go on forever and ever. We don't want this to be 3 and 4 hours long. No one wants to sit through that.
Absolutely not.
That raises another question.
Yeah. I
Well,
think there is some
there is
urgency.
an urgency.
Yeah.
The Met Council would certainly say there was. But I also think you really, we want to be expedient, but we also, the other question I had is, do you see there being one committee that's always working, and then you bring in people like the Purple Line?
Like a work group.
Yeah, do you have a working work group that meets every meeting, and then you bring in different people with data? Like the Met Council brings their data in, and the Purple Line,
I like
against
that
the Purple
idea.
Line, they bring their data. And so is there a steering committee or something that is always meeting, and then you grab these other people to come in? And I would say, we did the Nature Center, those meetings, we had 2 different groups, and we had 5 meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we had them every other week, I think.
Yes.
So we stuck to a schedule, and we, and those were.
I
And
think
that-
that's going to be critical, is to have that schedule laid out at the beginning so people know
Yeah.
when they can engage and they can get that onto their schedules.
Do you think, based on what I've heard tonight, and you see Mike and Steve are here this evening as well, maybe the 3 of us can try to sketch out what we think would be an appropriate schedule and
Yes.
facilitator and steering committee? I'm starting to think the steering committee might be a good idea, because then you've got a constant group
Right.
that gets all the data.
Right,
And I would say they need to be sort of nonpartisan.
right.
Right.
That would be my advice.
Yes,
You-
unless,
you don't
unless
have
it's,
to do
no, unless it's removed from what's gone before, we may as well not bother. It has to be outside of that, it just has to be.
I
That
think so.
sound good?
I
Should
think
we
that
put
that's a
some
good
things
idea.
together
Yeah.
and bring that back at
Yeah.
the next meeting? Or I can do it as a precursor to our next meeting, and then you can give me feedback.
I think that's a good idea. If you get maybe a little bit of
At
the
least a
structure
concept.
to us, and then everyone can weigh in with you and bring it back
Okay.
as a more formalized plan, so that we know going into the new year, this is when the survey's going to go out. These are is it going to be 5 meetings or 6 meetings? What's it going to be like?
It will also give your people who are going to supply information a better idea of when they have to have all their stuff together.
Right. Because, I think it's going to be important that we have staff from the Met Council present. I think it's important that we have the No Rush Line folks present their data. Anyone else that, I'm thinking of other, data that might be relevant.
Maybe the major businesses, what kind of staffing issues they think this will help them with.
And those you can do through some survey things too, or a web page
Right.
like Nikki
But I mean, we
mentioned.
could have somebody that you could have, all of the major people talk to one person and have that person come and say, this is what we got from the major businesses.
Councilmember Knudsen, you had something?
Oh, that's old.
Okay.
I do have one thing, though. As we're talking here, I'm thinking it's important that we talk about the scope. Even maybe, everything leads off with kind of a credo that we support public transportation, and our job is to make it work for Maplewood. And what worked for Maplewood, of course, is going to take care of all of the communities with the destination, towards St. Paul, so
Yep.
that's kind of a credo. And then the scope, we're open to a better transit system, but it's
I
going to
think
be a
that's a good
better
idea.
transit system.
I think that's a very good idea.
We wouldn't have the people, I don't want anything to do with this, or people that say, I only want this,
Yeah.
We want
That's-
to make sure that the idea is that it's going to be a recommendation on public transit.
And I would like to see a written report because that has
Oh, at the
always,
end?
I think, at the end,
Yeah.
been very helpful with all of the other engagement pieces that we've done. There's a report that summarizes the work that we've done, the conclusions that we've reached, and why we've reached those conclusions.
Okay.
Any other thoughts at this time, council members? Okay, then. Well, like I said, if you think of anything, let Melinda know, and she can include it in this next outline that she's going to pass out to us. So at this point, we have concluded our agenda, council members, and I know Councilmember Cave wasn't here. Hopefully she will, I'm sure she'll watch, and if there's anything that she would like to add as well, that certainly would be helpful so that we've all weighed in on this and what the process is going to look like. So with that, thank you, everyone, and we are adjourned. We'll be back at 7 o'clock.